We are back. I've been sick and my throat has not sounded good at all, so it's been a minute, but we're back. We're going to start with RDA'S, that topic that I've mentioned in a few other videos. We're finally going to get to that, so I'm really excited. This one's going to include some pretty interesting facts, I think, and I hope you guys all find it very informational. If you do, like, share, subscribe, all the things, and let's just get right down to it. First thing I want to preface this with is that on this topic of RDA'S, Recommended Daily Allowances, the pool of information is fairly shallow. And the reason for that is simply that the carnivore diet is not super well studied based on our modern scientific methods. Our scientific methods for studying all these things have improved within about the last 100 years, right? We've had all these developments and improved the ways by which we can measure, test, and study all of these factors in human life, right? But our ancestral diet was what we've eaten way before now. And much of how human beings have eaten has actually changed just within the last couple hundred years with, the Industrial Revolution and the change in technology so that people have farm equipment and all of these things that allow human beings to mass harvest amounts of grain. It really has changed the way human beings have eaten. So that being said, the global population obtains roughly 50% of their calories from 3 grain products: wheat, rice, and maize or corn. That basically just means that it's a lot harder to find good groups of people to base these studies of the carnivore diet on, simply because they don't exist in very many places anymore. I think it's coming, gaining popularity as more people find out about this and realize that this is how we were supposed to eat all along. But, for the most part, there's just a few hunter-gatherer tribes scattered around the globe, and they're not necessarily in areas where it's super easy for scientists to just go and study this stuff. So it makes it a little bit more difficult on that note to find research and information and all of these things that help us understand RDA'S specifically. There's just not a ton of research on that subject. Next point I want to make, number 1, all right, animal-based foods have all the nutrients that you need except for vitamin D, which you can get from the sun, okay? That is not a statement that I say lightly, because I have heard, and in fact I just watched a video today where an actual doctor was making claims about the carnivore diet that are completely false, and that multiple other doctors have already, debunked and proven wrong. Not to mention the fact that when I literally enter what I've eaten in a day in my Chronometer app, even an app like Chronometer that's not specifically carnivore, even those apps have the nutrients listed and the micronutrients, and you put in the meats and it gives you the list, and pretty much every single category is covered. All right, so if you hear anyone saying oh, you could be deficient on a carnivore diet, okay, first of all, when they say deficient, they don't mean that you are missing any minerals, because you're not. You're not going to be missing minerals, you're not going to be missing vitamins, okay? The carnivore diet covers the full spectrum. Certain items you have to go outside of strictly meats to obtain. We'll talk about that in a minute, all right? But you can get every nutrient from an animal-based diet. Second point is that the RDA'S that we have today were literally created and designed with a nutrient-deficient diet in mind. It's based on the SAD diet, the standard American diet. The scientists that created it, they were counting on the population in America to be deficient nutritionally, because they knew that they were going to be eating foods that either didn't have enough, because there were things like processed, refined grains, refined sugars, and man-made oils and butter substitutes like margarine, things like that. Okay, that's a large part of most human diets, and so in America, I should preface that, in America. All right, so the RDA'S were created with that type of diet in mind. Not to mention, they were also counting on human beings eating plenty of plant-based foods. When you eat plant-based foods, you have anti-nutrients. Anti-nutrients are just exactly what they say, anti-nutrient, all right? They pull nutrition from your body when you eat them, okay? They counter the nutrients within the plant itself. So spinach, for example, you might only be absorbing 10% or less of the calcium found in spinach, because the anti-nutrients are countering the full amount of calcium actually contained in spinach, all right? That's just one example. You can go down the list, and it pretty much applies, lots and lots of different ways concerning plants. RDAs were based on that. They were not based on human beings who have a nutritionally complete, well-rounded, absorbable diet of good animal foods. Number 3, animal-based foods, especially meat, are the most bioavailable sources of nutrition for human beings, okay? You're gonna get, from what I was researching, I think roughly 83 to 100% of the nutrition contained within meat when you eat it. It literally, it's so bioavailable, all right? Your body knows what to do with it. It does not have anti-nutrients blocking you from absorbing it. So more or less, if you have a healthy gut and your gut is healed, like that would be the only barrier per se, and that has nothing to do with the meat. That's a matter of our personal health, all right? So if you have a good gut, if your body's healthy, you're gonna be getting the nutrition when you eat that meat or when you eat those animal products. It's all there. So just to touch again real quick on the topic of ancestral diets and science and how that all relates, I think it's really important to remember that we need to wait for the science to catch up with what our bodies already know, okay? We don't have to like sit back and be like, oh, I can't eat this. It's like, no, if your body is telling you this, just be patient. The science will catch up. It'll get there. And, you know, you'll see all of that evidence that you need, like that's not anecdotal evidence, all right? So when you eat this diet and you notice all of these health improvements and these changes for the better, that's considered anecdotal evidence, all right? It's not been like officially studied or tested or measured. You know, we haven't had all of the complicating factors considered, etc. It's just what we see with our own eyes, all right? Which is, I think, kind of a shame that so many people discount that evidence just because it hasn't, you know, been tested scientifically. It's like, okay, but what did human beings have to do before all of these supposed scientific advancements? Okay, we've made a lot of progress. I don't mean to discount that, but I'm just saying it's very important to just trust your body and go with what you know your body is telling you with regards to your diet and your way of life, your way of eating. It's very important. Okay, so now that we have covered all of those topics, let's get into the actual deficiencies that people will accuse carnivores of having on this diet, all right? The big ones are vitamin C, calcium, vitamin D. All right, those are the big ones that I keep hearing repeatedly, basically. All right, vitamin D, again, we're going to say it you can get it from the sun, all right? So get your time in the sun and you're going to be good to go on that. Not a problem. All right, calcium, you can obtain calcium in a carnivore diet from sources like fish with the bones still in them. So like anchovies and sardines, if they've got the bones still in there, you eat that, you're gonna get your calcium. You can get calcium from bone broth. So you save all those chicken bones, pork bones, beef bones, make the broth. You're gonna get calcium from that as well. You can also get calcium from dairy products if you can handle the lactose and eating dairy. All right, plenty of sources of calcium. It is not something that you have to worry about as a carnivore. And all the calcium that you get from these products is going to be way more bioavailable, which means you probably are not going to need the 1,000 milligrams per day recommendation. All right, so the RDA'S apply on a nutritionally deficient diet. They don't apply the same way to carnivores because carnivores are not nutritionally deficient. They're eating a well-rounded diet. So you may not need, like, you know, the recommendation, like I said, for calcium, 1,000 milligrams a day. You may not need that if your body is actually absorbing 100% of the calcium that you're taking in, all right? So like with spinach, if you're taking in 1,000 milligrams of calcium from spinach, but your body can only use 10% of that, you're only getting 100. And that's why they recommend so much, just to make sure that your body is actually absorbing the bare minimum. On a carnivore diet, you are just not having to worry about that. And that pretty well applies to every single other nutrient because in animal products, if you think about it, it makes sense, right? Like animals are what? They're tissue, they're flesh, they're muscle meats, all right? The same compounds and nutrients that were used to grow that animal, that's what we have in our, you know, muscles, everything, bones, tendons, cartilage, all that. It's all in the animal too, because we're made of basically the same components, the same compounds. When you break the animals down and then you consume it yourself, you're getting all of the building blocks to get exactly what your body needs from that. Plants are a whole different ballgame, and I'm not saying you can't get some nutrition from plants, but it's just not the same as getting it from animal sources. The RDA'S apply when you're nutritionally deficient, okay? And again, this is an area where it'd be nice to have more studies, but if you're feeling healthy and you're doing well on this diet, you don't have to worry about those things. Go with what your body is telling you. The last one, vitamin C. All right, the carnivore sources for vitamin C they do exist, all right? So, for example, ground beef, grain-fed, has about 10 micrograms of vitamin C per gram of meat, all right? And grass-fed ground beef actually has about 25 micrograms of vitamin C per gram of grass-fed ground beef. So you're getting it, and then in sources like, like you have a medium rare steak, some people eat like raw liver, anytime you're eating meat that's not like completely cooked through, you're likely getting some of those trace amounts of vitamin C. And from what I understand, from what, other carnivores and doctors have said that I've listened to, basically you don't need as much vitamin C in a carnivore diet for whatever reason. That's just what I understand from what I've heard, what I've listened to others say and heard from doctors. You don't need as much vitamin C on this diet. And there are long-time carnivores that have absolutely no issues with vitamin C deficiency. And typically, if you're going to see signs of that deficiency, it's going to show up within about 3 months, all right? And I'll link my sources for that in the description, but that's what I've gathered from my research, all right? So if you're not seeing any signs of vitamin C deficiency within just a few months, you're probably good to go. That covers the 3, big ones for the carnivore diet. You can look up all the others for yourself. My husband and I found that tracking in Chronometer, we could see really easily what we're getting, okay? And listen, if you can't eat 2 pounds of beef a day, because that's one of the things I hear from a lot of carnivores, like, yeah, if you eat 2 pounds of meat a day, you'll be fine. You get all the nutrients that you need. And it's like, okay, that's great. But some of us can't hold 2 pounds of meat a day. Like, I can't hold that, at least not right now. I really enjoy using Chronometer temporarily, at least right now, to kind of give me an idea of how much of each nutrient I'm getting. Because my husband and I have both found that when we eat just a little bit of like pork, like those pork ribs or a little bacon, some sausage, whatever pork you eat, it really, really bumps up certain levels of certain nutrients that you may not be getting a ton of from the beef, all right? You might be getting some of it, but if you're not eating 2 pounds, you may not be getting enough. So if you eat just a little bit of other different meats, there you go. Like, that automatically gives you that balance of other nutrients that you need. And it's just a really neat thing to see. Like, all it takes is just a smidgen of variety and you're good to go, all right? And we're not worrying about meeting our 100% RDA, the recommended daily allowance, on each nutrient. Why? We're carnivore. We don't, we're absorbing everything that we eat. So we don't have to reach 100% on everything, because what are we going to do with it? The excess is just going to get flushed out. It's not like the body stores all of that. So it's just really not necessary. I hope that was super helpful to you. It was pretty amazing to me just learning what I've learned. I will link some resources below about the RDA'S. Amber O'Hearn is a good resource on this subject. She's done a lot of research. She wrote an excellent paper, which I will also link in the description below. And I hope to see you guys back soon. Bye, friends.